So my name is Barbara Squires. I am the Director of Leadership Development here at the Casey Foundation, and I will be the program lead for the Rising Leaders for Results Fellowship. We're super excited to have this chance to talk with you all. There will be a chance to answer questions at the end, but hopefully just going through some slides and hearing some background about the program will answer questions that you have. You can use the Q&A function in the webinar to pose questions or to put them in the chat. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? Next slide. There we go. So in the webinar today, we're just going to cover important information that we have to share with you about this leadership development opportunity. And as I said, there will be a chance for questions and answers at the end. Carol Abrams from our communication shop is on this webinar, and she's going to be monitoring both the Q&A area as well as the chat for questions. And at the end of the presentation, I'll ask her to share with us some of the questions that came in, and we'll take a shot at answering them for you. So next slide. Okay. Well, I want to start by talking first about the Casey Foundation's approach to leadership development, because this is really what the Rising Leaders Fellowship is built on. So for about the past 30 years, the foundation has been doing leadership development work. And over that period of time, we have built what is now a trademark approach to leadership development called Results Count. The mission of the Casey Foundation is to work toward improved outcomes for kids and families and communities in the U.S. And so our leadership work is actually highly aligned with the mission of the foundation. And so the work that we do through this program that we'll be talking about and our other Results Count programs is to help the leaders build their capacity to work toward achieving measurable and equitable results on behalf of the children and youth, families, and communities on behalf they work. We have a core set of tools and skills that make up Results Count and a set of competencies that we work from that will be deployed in the Rising Leaders Fellowship Program. And all of that is intended to build your skills as leaders in the field to achieve better outcomes for the populations with whom you work. Next slide. So with Results Count in mind, the Rising Leaders for Results Fellowship is specifically targeted to leaders who are in the age range of 24 to 31, who are working on behalf of children, youth, families, and communities. So we want you to be working in the social sector, but to be fairly early in your work careers. And that's why we're targeting the 24 to 31 age group. We've spent the last couple of years in developing this program and taking what we know from having worked for many years with seasoned leaders using Results Count to make it appropriate now for leaders who are earlier in their careers, who may have a certain level of authority, who may be just starting out in the work world, but for whom we think using a results-driven, equity-focused approach to their work can achieve better outcomes earlier in their careers. And so that's in large part why we're building this opportunity. And what we hope that the participants in the program will walk away with is this backpack of leadership competencies, tools, experiences, relationships that they can carry forward in their careers over many, many years to come. Next slide. So more specifically, the purpose of the Rising Leaders for Results Fellowship is to sharpen and deepen the leadership skills of the applicants in the program. We want you to be able to ignite actions with others to achieve equitable results, address leadership challenges that get in the way of achieving those results, expand your horizons, also be able to advocate for yourself, and then grow your networks to accelerate your impact now in the jobs that you have currently, and then over the arc of the careers that you have. Next slide. So at this point, what I'd like to do is introduce Dana Jackson. Dana is a Casey Fellow, but she's also been one of our Results Count faculty members for many, many years, and she's been helping to lead many of the other programs that we do. Dana is going to be one of the 2 faculty members who will be working with the Rising Leaders program. So Dana, I'm going to ask you to talk over the next couple of slides with the folks on the call.
Awesome. Thank you, Barbara, and good afternoon or good morning to everyone. And as Barbara said, I'm going to talk through a couple of slides, and I'm going to start with the key components of the fellowship. So as you can see here, for this first class of the fellowship, we're looking at a class of 12 young leaders in that 24 to 31 year age band that Barbara spoke about. The fellowship will consist of 8 seminars and a booster session. And these 8 seminars and booster sessions will have a span of 21 months. And you guys can go online and see the specific dates if you've not checked those out yet. And a big component of the fellowship, and Barbara began to speak to this when she said we're looking for young leaders, rising leaders who are working in the social sector. We're doing that because this the big component here is really around applying what you're learning to the work that you're doing. So it's really about applied learning and action on a specific challenge or a desired result that is within your wheelhouse in your current role with it that you're working in. Another component of the fellowship is a customized leadership plan that we're calling Build Your Own Experience, and it will be based on the fellow's interest area. The last component that I'll speak to will really be that each fellow will have access and be expected to participate in coaching, mentorship, and fellow-led affinity groups for peer-to-peer support. Next slide, please. So, of course, there's value to the fellow for participating in the fellowship. Barbara spoke to a backpack of leadership skills that a fellow will build. We also know that the fellowship brings value to the fellow's organization, and it does so in several ways, and I'd like to talk about a few of them. Through the program, the participant or the fellow will gain sharpened skills, begin to build out a really robust network, participate in coaching, have reflection time, which is oftentimes, as you all know, hard to come by, and quite a bit more from participating in the experience. And the expectation and the real want and desire here is for the fellow to bring back the skills and the tools from the fellowship to bring it back into their home organizations and apply them in real time to the jobs that they're currently in, as well as enlist their colleagues and stakeholders in achieving accelerated results. So to this end, it's going to be really important that the participants employing organization, if you are connected to an organization, that organization, and specifically your supervisor, is supporting your use of work time to participate in the fellowship and to attend all the seminars as well as other program activities. And there will be several that you'll be able to participate in. Next slide, please.
So this one, I think, comes back to me.
It does.
Thank you. So we want to make sure that everyone knows that in participating in the program, there should be no cost to you other than your time to be in the program. So we're not looking for folks to pay anything out of pocket. All of your travel to attend program seminars will be covered by the foundation. That includes hotel and meals, travel related expenses. So things like parking at the airport or taking Ubers to get to the hotel from the airports. All of that will be picked up by the foundation. We'll provide all the necessary materials that you'll need. So all of those costs of the cost of participating in the program will be incurred by the foundation and not by the fellows. There's us, we recognize that there may possibly be in the group of fellows young parents. And if that's the case, we'll have the ability to talk about a stipend that we can provide toward child care support. And I just want to be real clear that we're not providing the child care. Participants will need to make those arrangements, but we want to help to augment what you have available to cover childcare, recognizing the additional time that will be required for you to be away to participate in the program. So all of that will be covered by the foundation. And then for the organizations from which the fellows come, we are going to make a $8,000 unrestricted grant to the participants' organization over the course of the 21 months. And that's really to, I mean, $8,000 may not be exact compensation for the time that you will be away to participate in the fellowship seminars. But we want to acknowledge that your organizations are also making a commitment by allowing you to attend, and wanted to provide at least some unrestricted grant funds back to the organization that they can use for whatever purposes they feel are important, whether it's to bring somebody else in to cover on a project you might be working on or whatever, but it will be a small grant that we'll be able to make to your organization. If the fellow is self-employed, obviously there isn't an organization then to give the $8,000 to. What we will do instead is provide $8,000 over the course of the 21 months to compensate for the time that you'll be in the seminars where you otherwise wouldn't be in self-employed work, recognizing that you'd be losing some time away from paid work. So we just wanted to make sure that everybody understood, one, you should have no out-of-pocket costs that you'll incur, and there are these small compensations either to the organization or to a self-employed fellow, just to make the participation in the program a little bit easier. So let me hand it back to Dana.
Thank you, Barbara. So I'm going to talk with you all, next slide, please, about eligibility. And just hit some of the high points here. So eligible participants will be between the ages of 24 and 31 on November 14th through 2023. So I know that we've gotten some questions about the age band and can we fudge a little one way or the other? And the answer to that is no, not so much. We've spent, as Barbara noted, a considerable amount of time with the co-creation and co-design team, and done, research and really looked at what we're able to do and what makes sense for us. And this is where we have landed. So between the ages of 24 and 31 on November 14th, 2023. The eligible participant will be already working to improve their communities and the lives of individuals and families. So this means that we're looking for people who are already working in the social sector and not in school. And the rationale behind that is, as I noted earlier, this really is about learning and applying that learning to the work that you're already doing. So it becomes important that you're already seated in the work, if you will, and you have a place to practice and apply your learning. Eligibility, again, be able to attend all program seminars and activities, and that the fellowship will run from November 2023 through July 2025. And again, the specific dates are online. I can't underscore the importance of attendance enough. It is really to the benefit of you to be able to attend our program seminars, and that is indeed the expectation for participation. Candidates can apply whether they're nominated or not. So you could self-nominate and you can apply without having been nominated by someone else. And these are just, 4 quick bullets, and there's more criteria online that we really encourage you to look at so that you have that in your line of sight. So with that, Barbara, I'm going to toss it back. Nope, it's still me. Yep, that's okay. So let's talk a little bit about the selection criteria and the ideal candidate. So we're really looking for candidates who want to grow personally and professionally, who are willing to explore all dimensions of their leadership. And this includes the intersection and the effect of race, class, and culture on one's leadership. The ideal candidate will be open to exploring not only various dimensions of one's leadership, but receiving feedback and coaching. We want folks that are also open to self-reflection and who have a true desire to make and lead change that creates equitable opportunities for children, families, and communities. And lastly, I would add here that are willing to, not only willing to, but open to learning individually and with others. So just a little bit about what the ideal candidate looks like. Barbara, I'll toss it back to you.
Okay. Thanks, Dana. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about the application process. So if you've gone online on the KC website, you'll see that there is a link for applying there. But let me back up from there. There also is a link for recommendations. I think we're calling them recommendations rather than nominations on the website. And to answer one of the questions that have already come in, you do not, as Dana said, have to be recommended or nominated for the program to apply. We actually created that option in part to help spread the word. I mean, we know who we know, but we're really hoping that by getting this out to those folks that they can in turn share the word out. And by being recommended for the program online, what that means is that the recommender provides the name of the person they're recommending and an email address, and then that person will automatically get information about the program and make a decision as to whether this is the right opportunity to go after or not. Whether you are recommended or not has no bearing on your chances of getting selected. It's just in large part a way for us to spread the word. The recommenders are asked to put in a blurb about why they're recommending that person, and that just gives us a little bit more insight into who that person is should they decide to apply. But again, your chances aren't affected at all whether or not you're recommended. On the website, there is a link to the application. The application is on a platform called SurveyMonkey Apply. We've been using this platform now for several of our programs. It's pretty easy to maneuver. If you have any problems at all with the application platform, please reach out immediately and we'll troubleshoot that for you. But we've been having a lot of luck with SurveyMonkey Apply, so we hope that you find it easy to use. Next slide, please. So what we're interested in and what we're asking about in the application are a set of questions, and they're basically up on the screen now. These will be short answer questions that will tell us something about who you are, what you do, and what you care about or are passionate about, why you want to pursue this opportunity, and then some reflections that will indicate to us maybe your orientation to some of the key components of the work that we're going to be doing with the leaders in the program. So a reflection about your earliest experience with race, how you think about the terms, the equity and well-being, and then where you want to go with your lives over the next several years. If you're planning on staying in the social sector, if you're thinking of pivoting to something else, all of that will be helpful to us in making what we hope is a really informed decision about the first cohort. You know, it is only 12 slots, unfortunately, that we have in the program. And so we're looking for people who will make the most of the opportunity, where we think the payoff will be greatest for them. And also where there's good fit among the 12 participants who will be in the program. So there will be these short answer questions in the application that we'll ask you to address. Next slide, please. So in addition to those questions that are in the application, we are then giving applicants the option, and this is not a requirement, and it also isn't something that you will be assessed on if you choose not to do it. We just wanted to give one other way for applicants to tell us about themselves, and that's by submitting something that is more in the creative vein of who you are. And so it's a way of you're telling us kind of on your own terms something about yourself, introducing yourself. It can introduce yourself beyond the questions that we've asked, show your passion, tell us something about the day in your life, how you think about results and equity and well-being. And it can be done in many forms. It can be a written piece, it can be a poem, it can be a PowerPoint deck, it can be a video, it can be a Prezi, it can be an art piece, just whatever you choose to submit, if you decide to, that will just share something else about you. And then we do ask you to provide a short explanation about why you're providing that particular piece to share something about yourself. So we have a little context for that. But again, this is optional. And if you choose not to do it, we'll work from the questions that you answered in the application. So next slide, please. So a little bit about the timing for getting your applications in and are completing the selection process. So we're having this webinar today, and then if you looked at the information on the website, you'll see that next week on August 10th, we're doing a similar webinar, and that will be for people who are supervisors of potential applicants. We thought that we ought to give a chance to supervisors or representatives from the organizations from which the applicants come to hear more, you know, from the horse's mouth about the program and allow them time to ask questions as well. Again, your supervisor doesn't have to participate. We just thought that it would be helpful. Both this webinar and the webinar next week are recorded and they will be up on the website. So, you know, if your supervisor isn't available to participate next week, they will have access to the recording. The last day for folks to recommend someone is August 31st. And we just set a date like that to allow time for the recommended person to get the information and still have, you know, a little over a week to get an application in if they're choosing to submit. September 11th is the last day to submit your applications. And then we move into our review process. It's going to be a two-step process where we will first narrow down the pool of applicants based on the written application to a certain number that will be invited in for interviews. These will be virtual interviews that will be held on October 11th and 12th. We do ask you to hold both dates for the interviews because they will probably be, they will be comprised of both individual interviews, but also potentially a group activity. And so we want you to hold both October 11th and 12th for the interviews. And then we will make a final decision of the class of 12 and announce that by October 25th. Next slide. So then for the class that was selected, the work of the program actually will begin. There will be an orientation call that will be held on November 14th. So that's the start date of the program. From 2 to 3:30. It's a 90-minute call just to allow the class of 12 to start to get to know each other and to hear a little more specifically about the programs, about the program and logistics, the things that may be top of mind for the group. There will then be coaching calls, individual calls that will be set up by our faculty that will happen in November and December. Again, these would be one-on-one calls to help us start to get to know the selected fellows better. And then there is one webinar that will be held on December 7th from 2:30 to 5, again to continue the joining process and start then to prepare you for the seminars. As you see here, the seminars will be in 2024 and 25. They are each about 2.5 days long. Travel they start at with breakfast in the morning of the first day. So you'll be asked to travel in the day before, usually, you know, depending on where you are. Should be able to get into wherever we're having the seminars by traveling maybe the afternoon or evening of the day before. And we will end on the third day with enough time for almost everybody, we hope, to get home. The seminars are spaced roughly about 8 weeks apart. And part of the work of the program will be application work between the seminars, and that's why we allow for that spacing. And then in the summer of 2024, our faculty will also each be doing a site visit to each of the 12 fellows. Next slide. After the conclusion of the fellowship term in 2025, the first cohort will then become our, first class that will start a network of ongoing classes in this particular fellowship. What we've learned from other programs that we've done, particularly our signature leadership program, which is the Children and Family Fellowship, which we now have been doing for 30 years. We have found that when the class, 21 months may sound like a long time, but it does go by quickly. And what we have found is that people really are not ready for it to end at that point. And so we have created a network with our Children and Family Fellows that continues to this day. And we want to do the same with our Rising Leaders Fellowship, so that you can continue to stay connected to each other, to the foundation, and have an opportunity for ongoing professional and leadership development. Next slide. So that's it on the core components and the nuts and bolts of the program. If as you're considering applying for this, or working through the application, if you have any, questions at all, we would invite you to reach out to me. Again, it's Barbara Squires. I'll put this, the slides will come off down in just a minute, but I'll put my name and email address in the chat. But it's also on the KC website, and really encourage you to look at the website, because there's a lot more detail about the program and the component parts. So thank you, Carol, for dropping that in. So with that, I think we can take the slides down, and Carol, if you want to field some of the questions that have been coming in, be happy to try to answer those.
Sure. Barbara, if you could talk about if someone changes jobs or roles over the course of the fellowship.
Right, and that's not an unusual thing. It's certainly not an unusual thing in our Children and Family Fellowship. I think oftentimes these sorts of opportunities attract people who are thinking about their next big thing. And so that's not something that is unusual. But what we really want is for people, as they move jobs, to be able to kind of pick up and start with a new body of work, a new result, a new challenge that they want to work on. So it's not like you come in with something and you leave that organization and then you just, come to seminars and don't do any work. We really expect that in your new role that you're identifying a challenge or a result to work on, and you'll move into picking up with that.
Thank you. I'm going to read this question. How do you disrupt white supremacy tendencies in the dominant cultural interpretation of professionalism and professional development? How is this reflected in the fellowship?
Okay, I'm not entirely sure everything that question might be about, but we spend a lot of time in the work that we do with our fellows, again, not just in this program, but in our other programs, talking about racial injustice, white supremacy, and what we try to incorporate into the program are a variety of ways to have conversations, to think about authors and writers who have come to this work through different perspectives, different learning styles. So it's not kind of a white dominant focused approach to learning. I don't know if that's what the question is getting at, but let me just leave it at that, and Dana, see if there's anything you would add to that.
Yeah, I think that it's a big question. And I think that the things that Barbara said are spot on. And we spend a lot of time talking about mental models and really checking ourselves and learning as we go. And I think this is a place where we welcome ongoing feedback during the duration of the fellowship as well.
A question about how much time should fellows anticipate between seminars to dedicate to homework?
We try to be aware of the fact and keep in mind that the fellowship is not the only thing that you are doing. You really have, full-time jobs and family obligations and all of that. But there will be what we call both application and prep work to get ready for the next session. And a lot of that, let me start over. What we really hope you are bringing into the program is real work. That's why we want you to be employed. That's why we want you to be working on a challenge or a result, and that you're using the fellowship experience to work that. So what we hope you bring to this is a view that this is really a way to augment what you're doing and to support you in the work that you're doing. And so the real work aspect and the application of what you're learning to that real work is a way to just accelerate what you're doing. So hopefully the work that you're doing between the seminars is applying what you're learning to work that you would be doing anyway. Having said that, there will be readings, there will be coaching calls, there will be things that we'll ask you to reflect on and do journal entries on. And so, I mean, this is very ballparky, but I would say, you should expect, maybe about 10 hours of work that you might not otherwise be devoting to this between the seminars. But again, it's, it'll vary between the seminars. And again, most of the application is really about the work that you're trying to do. And so hopefully it will just feel like a way to accelerate in doing that work. Dana, anything you'd add to that? Okay, Carol, what else you got?
Let's knock out a few logistics questions.
Sure.
You've asked finalists to hold October 11th and 12th. Any specific time windows on those dates?
Not yet, and I apologize for that. We are probably going to start interviews as early as 9 a.m. East Coast time, recognizing that not everybody is on the East Coast, so those interviews will be staggered. But the group activities will have to happen in the afternoon of East Coast time to allow all of the finalists to participate in those. So I would ask you, if you're, I'm asking those of you who are applying to hold the 11th and 12th East Coast time. It'll probably end up being like, a 9 to 5 kind of time frame. For the folks on the West Coast, it'll probably be afternoon into the early evening. But we will try to concentrate the any group activities to within the workday, no matter where you are. And we'll try to also to stagger the interviews so that you're not having to get up at the crack of dawn to have an interview, nor be up past your bedtime to do the interviews.
Besides Baltimore, where might the in-person seminars take place? Are they all in the US? And I think you've definitively said they're not all going to be in Baltimore.
Yeah, they won't all be in Baltimore. We're waiting to see where the fellows come from to fill in the other locations. We want to try to share the travel burden. And so that's why we're not making everybody come to Baltimore for all 8 of the seminars. But they all will be in the United States.
Does the idea,
and I'll just say, very unlikely to include Hawaii and Alaska. So they'll be in the continental US.
In terms of selection, is there any ideal number of years of work experience?
Dana, you want to take that?
Absolutely. I would not say that there's an ideal number of years of work experience. I think it really is more about the experience that one, or the experiences that one has had while working, and what they think their trajectory is, or where, and not even an upward trajectory, but like, what's the work that you want to do going forward based on the impact that you want to have, is what I would offer.
A question has come in about people who might not yet be working at an organization in the social sector. Reading from the question, can I join if I have plans to apply the learning to eventually start my own nonprofit?
So we're not excluding people who currently run their own organization or otherwise self-employed, but we do want you to already be in that position so that you can hit the ground and applying the learning in real time. So we are asking people who are applying to be employed, not anticipating being employed or starting an organization down the road.
Any pro or con if the organization the applicant is working for is currently a Casey grantee?
No, you don't get extra points for that, and you're not dinged for that either. So, yeah, that we don't want to advantage anybody in that way.
And should the applicants anticipate needing to attach letters of recommendation or some kind of support letter to their application?
We aren't asking for that. You are asked, though, to attest to the fact that your supervisor has approved, your participation in this. So it's kind of the honor system that you've talked over the opportunity with your supervisor and your organization, and they are, in full support of you participating, because they are going to have to allow you to travel to and be away from work for the seminars. So while we don't need letters, we are asking you to attest to the fact that that's all been worked out.
You mentioned that you want candidates that are working, not students full time. What if someone is working and is also a part-time student?
That's fine. I think the only thing to take into consideration is your own ability to manage a full-time job, going to school part-time and then participating in something like this. And I would really hope that folks are going into this with kind of eyes wide open about both the commitment, the time commitment, and the sort of personal energy and resources and family willingness to allow you to be otherwise occupied. So, if you think you can manage all of that, then yes, you can definitely apply, but would really hope people take seriously the time commitment in order for you to really maximize the opportunity that you'll have from being in the fellowship.
I can answer one of the questions, which is what happens if you join the fellowship and you're under the age of 31, but obviously by the time the fellowship would end, you're over the age of 31. That would be fine. It's your age as of that November 14th, 2023 date.
Carol,
and
I just want to say something about
of course,
why we're being kind of particular about the age range. And that is, I think Dana alluded to this a little bit. So we're really trying to create a cohesive cohort of what we're calling rising leaders, who are more or less at the sort of same point in their careers, and sort of their time of life. So that you have a lot in common, a lot to learn from one another. And so we're trying to keep the cohort pretty contained in order, so we don't have kind of real wide bands of both experience, life or professional experience, where some people have far more authority, others have less authority. We're really trying to make it a cohesive group, and that's why we're sticking to the age band that we've created.
Question, Dana, could you tell us more about the curriculum specifics? What kind of subtopics can we anticipate learning more about?
Yeah, absolutely. So there will be what we call an arc of learning that fellows will receive that will outline what the focus is for each of the seminars. As Barbara talked about early in the webinar, she spoke about competencies. So within the fellowship, there are 6 core competencies that range from collaborative leadership, adaptive leadership, really holding a results-based stance, racial equity, ability to advocate for self-enroll, and there are several others. So the actual content or the curriculum will be in support of those particular core competencies. So you will have things like really, how do you hold a result, and what does it mean to hold that result, and how to use data for decision making, both qualitative and quantitative data. indicators, doing factor analysis, sort of the technical pieces, but there will also be pieces that are pulled through that are more about adaptive leadership and collaborative leadership and self as leader and advocating for self in role. So it'll follow the core competencies, and there will be, you know, pulled throughout a racial equity and an equity focus that will be braided through.
Thank you. A question for someone who works in the arts and culture section for a nonprofit. We talk about, you know, people with existing work in the social sector. How broadly do we define that? For instance, this person from the arts and culture nonprofit, is that an eligible field?
Yeah, it should be. I think in large part depends on exactly what the individual does and what the organization is about. Ultimately, we want the selected fellows to be working on behalf of children, youth, families, communities. And so if you're in the arts field, if your work is ultimately to benefit communities or somehow maybe about teaching or using art as a way of doing either youth development or fostering families or somehow in supporting communities, I think you can think sort of broadly about all of that. But that's our ultimate goal, is to have people in the program who are, the thing that unifies them is this intention to be working on behalf of children, youth, families, and or communities. And so would ask you to describe in your application, there will be questions about that, is how your work does allow you to do that.
Dana, this question is for you. How will the class be challenged to apply knowledge into an actionable plan, and will there be accountability?
Yeah, absolutely. So what will happen, just sort of as a little bit of a flavor, and this is very high level, but what will happen is during seminars, the fellows will be exposed to different pieces of the results count framework, some of the adaptive leadership components that I've talked about. And as you all heard earlier in the presentation, we're asking that you come in or you develop with your coach an area of interest or a result that you're holding. So that will sort of be the unifying construct for each fellow. So as fellows are learning or sharpening skills that they're holding, they will each time be asked when they go back to their home organizations or to their communities to apply what they're learning. So for example, there's a concept within Results Count that's called factor analysis, really figuring out what's helping, what's hurting, what are some of the ways in which you can advance, accelerate your work. So they might go back to their home community and vet some of the factors or some of the work that they've done, or do a parallel process with folks inside their organization or the population with whom they're working on behalf of. The accountability piece comes in that there is clearly self-accountability, right? Holding oneself accountable, but also via coaching with their respective coach. And then the peer support piece and peer accountability is a big component as well.
Thank you. I'll answer a few logistics questions. In terms of when to arrive, yes, it is the day before the first day listed on the seminar. So the example in the chat is if it's listed as January 17 to 19, yes, the expectation is you arrive at the seminar location on the 16th. How many fellows apply per year? This is the very first time this fellowship is being offered. So we will know when we know, but we can't give that number now. And minimum or maximum number of recommendations. No recommendations are required at the first round of applications. So everyone is just putting their best foot forward, and that would only come into play later on in the process. Interesting question. Is there a lens of being overqualified? I will look to you, Barbara.
No, I don't think so. I think especially given the age range that we're looking at. I think if you can explain in your application why you're applying and what you hope to get out of it, that's what we will be looking for. We're not setting any criteria about, oh, they don't need this, so you won't get in. We're assuming that the people who are applying see value in the opportunity.
A question about type of role that someone has now. They asked, do I have to be a direct service social service professional, or what if I'm on the development team or communications team for an organization?
Yeah, all of that is fine. You do not have to be in a direct service role like a case manager or a program director working directly with families and communities. And neither is it required that the organizations that you're from be direct service. So intermediaries, so whether it's a philanthropy or a national organization, all of those are also, those are all fine. We're not ruling people out for that. Again, we're looking for the focus on children and families. So if you're either an entrepreneur or you're in an organization, even a for-profit organization, that's also allowed. If the work that you are doing is focused on children, youth, and families, then that's what we're looking for. I had a question that came to me before the seminar from somebody who is in a national consulting organization where not all the work of the organization is focused on children and families, but that person's body of work is. And they were wondering if that was allowable. And I said, yes. And I think the only thing we would be wanting to know is that sort of mid-program, they wouldn't get pulled out of that work and suddenly be going, to do business development with a private equity firm or something like that. I mean, we really want to know that they're staying focused on children, youth, families, and communities.
Could more than one person from the same organization apply? And would you choose more than one person from the same organization?
Certainly more than one from the same organization can apply. Whether we would take more than one from the same organization, I think the likelihood, to be really honest, the likelihood of that is probably slim, only because we recognize that we've got just 12 slots for this program and we are trying to spread the opportunity around. If people made a super compelling case for themselves and that, I think, it could be a consideration. Probably unlikely, but I don't want to rule it out.
Before we close, I want to give you opportunity first to reiterate the attendance policy, but also to ask if you'd be willing to stay on for a few more minutes because so many people have questions.
I can stay on for a few more minutes. Dana, are you able to? Okay. Sure.
So yes, if you want to reiterate, because a number of people have asked, they know they're going to miss one, or hey, what if suddenly there's a death in the family?
Yeah. So we really want to start out with a fellowship class of 12 people who know that they can come to everything. And so we're asking that. If you already know you're going to miss one of the 8 seminars, I would say this is probably not the time to apply. However, having said that, we know that life happens. And so absences may end up unexpected absences may end up occurring if there are family emergencies. We would recognize that, but we just know that, again, 21 months may sound like a long time, 8 seminars may sound like a lot, but there's so much that we want to be able to deploy, and it's all so much the richer and better if it's delivered in person and not kind of made up where you do makeup work after the fact. And so we want to limit the missed opportunities only to family emergencies or obviously illness, so that, again, the 12 folks who are selected can really maximize the opportunity.
A question that might be on the mind of a lot of people. You made the point that there'll be no out-of-pocket to pay for things related to the seminar, but does that mean people have to pay them up front and get reimbursed, or prepaid, or handled in another way? Like, how should people anticipate?
Sure. So certainly your travel and your hotel will get paid for directly by the foundation. Travel related expenses generally are done through reimbursement, but if it poses some kind of financial hardship, we have ways of working around that where money can be advanced. And then at the end of the seminar, we just kind of reconcile it. And, you may still get some reimbursement because we didn't advance enough money because things ended up being more expensive. But for the most part, the travel related expenses are handled through a reimbursement process. But the real costly things like hotel and travel are paid directly by the foundation. So those wouldn't have to be reimbursed.
A number of questions about eligibility, either someone working for an international company overseas but focused on the US, a question about immigration status. So if you could just reiterate where the work should be that the fellow's doing, and whether immigration status or location in the US matters.
Immigration status is not something that we inquire about, or citizenship status. Again, we just want to make sure that you're able to attend all the activities that we'll be doing, which will all be in the lower 48 of the United States. And in terms of being employed by an international organization, Casey is a domestically focused foundation. And so even if your employing organization is international, we would want to know that the work you are doing is domestically focused. So on children, youth, families, communities in the United States.
A question of, if someone is not employed, but they're doing volunteer or advocacy work in these subject areas, would they be eligible? So they're not doing paid work, but they're doing unpaid work.
We're really looking for folks where this is your full-time work. And so I would say your chances of getting in, if the work you're doing is on an entire volunteer basis, would probably be pretty slim. Am I overstating this, Dana? Okay.
No, I think that's correct.
A question: does the scope of an individual's work, and in parens directly impacting a smaller number of students, impact your decision making?
I think for this program, that's less of an issue. For our Children and Family Fellowship, which is really directed more toward mid-career and seasoned leaders, we are looking for both scope and scale. But for this program, we recognize that where folks are in their careers at this age that they're in, their scope and level of influence is probably much smaller. So I would not say that that is something that is a considerable factor in making a decision about selection.
Do you have any expectations of what a starting point is, given that these are people early in their careers? The exact question is, are there expectations of what the starting point of the fellow's current leadership competencies should be?
I'll take a stab at this and I'll invite Dana to join me. I would say I don't think there's any sort of standard starting point. We believe that people can lead from whatever seat they are in. So, you know, would want you to have a body of work that you're responsible for and contributing to, but we're not as focused on titles like director, manager, vice president, whatever. It could be that you're, you know, an associate or a case manager or an analyst, or I don't even know what all the titles might be. So the starting point, I think, is, I don't think there's a standard response to that. It is really that you've got real work to do. You've got the heart for this work. You're trying to move the needle on outcomes for kids and families, and your work provides a vehicle through which that can be done. But Dana, what would you say?
I wholeheartedly agree. I think the most, for me, there are really three important things. One, you have a body of work that you're focused on and you're authorized to move forward. Two, your supervisor is in agreement that you've got this body of work, you're authorized to move it forward, and you can participate in the fellowship activities. And third is that that supervisor also provides you space and support to practice what you're learning and to apply what you're learning.
A number of people have asked about the recording of this webinar. We will email the recording to everybody who's registered for the webinar. We also will post it on the Annie Casey website. I have seen people post questions in chat that were answered earlier. So if we did not address your question, you may want to watch the recording because it is highly likely we responded to that earlier. But there is one new question, which is, would you elaborate on community? You know, we use community a lot, but what does it mean to be working on a result that is for community or for communities?
Yeah, I think by community, what we're talking about is you're doing some kind of place-based work. You're focused on a geographic area. So it could be a neighborhood or a community or a city or a county, or, you know, go out from there. But where the work is really focused on improved outcomes within a geographic area, could be for a particular population, it could be for the whole of the population within that geographic area. But I think that's probably, at least it's the way I think of community used in this way.
Let's wrap up. And what I would say is, anyone who had a question that just was not answered and they can't see it in the material, please email Barbara. Barbara's email is bsquires, BSQUIRES @aecf.org. And thank you very much. We had lots and lots of interest, and I really appreciate everybody coming on. So we'll be ending the webinar. We really appreciate your participation. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.